So my name is Lindsey Roddy. I have been a nurse for about 9 years in the intensive care unit and in the recovery room. I'm also a PhD student here in the United States at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And in this whole journey, I also became the CEO and founder of the company Roddy Medical, which supports the work that I am doing. I had always been interested in research. So a couple years into being a nurse in the intensive care unit, I decided to go back for my PhD. And that's where I got my first exposure to nursing innovation and particularly product development. And so I was sitting around with some very creative nurse PhDs who one had created a software and another had created a device. And they simply asked me the question, Lindsey, what are your ideas? And I kind of sat back and I'd never thought that way before. I'd never really considered that, but my mind jumped to an incident that almost cost one of my patients his life. And I started moving in the direction of patient care safety and actually developing a device around this instance. So I took care of a lot of open heart surgery patients. And those patients have 5 to 15 lines easy coming out of various locations. And yet it is the standard of care to get them up and walking just hours after surgery, after their breathing tube is out, even with those life support medications. And so getting my gentleman up after surgery and the line that was holding his life support medication got caught and pulled out of his neck. And he started to go downhill, decompensate. We had to do some interventions, and thank goodness he was okay at the end of the day, but I was not. And so with this question from these professors, my mind went back to this instance and I started asking questions of my own. So I started talking to my fellow nursing colleagues, asking, have you experienced anything like this? What do you do to prevent things like this from happening? And nurses were taping things together to try to help manage tubes, lines, and cords. They still are. And what happened to me, I found, was not an isolated incident at all. We did about 150 interviews with nurses, therapists, physicians, but especially nurses, and found that about 63% of them in this space had witnessed a close call. About a quarter of them had witnessed a potentially life-threatening safety event. And they talked about several patient deaths with me and injuries, staff injuries, patient injuries. And so there wasn't anything that existed that is available to prevent these safety events. And I never truly intended to get into engineering and tech when I started my PhD program, but I started to try to figure out how could we make something, because I said, I never want this to happen again to anybody's patients. So started drawing things, started putting together prototypes, started talking to more engineers, and slowly and surely, I ended up getting into this medical device product innovation space. And it has been such a fun journey and a crazy journey, but this is a place that nurses should be, because of the positive impact they can have in medical device and product development. So I've been in this space now for about 5 years, developing this product and a couple others. In talking to hundreds of nurses about their issues around tube, line, and cord management and the safety events around that, we found that there was nothing else that existed that would have prevented these safety events we were hearing, like the one I talked about where a line pulled out and the patient almost passed away. And so we created something with a team. And so I actually have it on. So I'm going to introduce you the Secure Move TLC device. So this device is different than anything else on the market in 3 key ways. 1, it prevents against pulling and dislodgement. So even if the force hits from one side, when your lines are pulled, nothing will pull on the side of the patient. So the force is going to hit the device, not the patient. Current devices out there fail between 4 and 9 pounds of force on average with sutures and adhesive securement devices, et cetera. And our device can take 80 plus pounds of pull force without any issue. Second, we designed it after talking to many, many nurses so that it could accommodate a variety of different tubes, lines, and cords. So this can take up to 8 tubes, lines, and cords of a variety of sizes and can accommodate patient care from admission to discharge. And take your transducers, which I don't have one on here right now, but it can take up to 3 transducers to help optimize hemodynamic monitoring. So when I'm titrating vasoactive medications. And then third, we designed it around the safety events that we were hearing about directly from clinicians. So it was designed for mobility. It's designed for transport. I'm going to take it off so you can see it. Designed for mobility and designed for transport to make that care safer, because that was where a gap was. And so it's lightweight, comfortable on patients for a very long period of time. And all of these different requirements, all of these different things that we decided that it needed to do, all of these prototypes, all 50 or so, were put in the hands of nurses every single step of the way to make sure that we were meeting their needs. And so I think that's one of the ways that it outperforms what currently exists out there. And so I wouldn't have been able to do it without my nursing colleagues. And that's where I want to emphasize that you have a powerful set of skills and you have knowledge that can really impact this space with medical devices. And so we're just starting to get this in use in hospitals, and I'm excited to be working again with my nursing colleagues to really try to now get some data on how this impacts patient care. So this is the Secure Move TLC. We don't typically think about product development as a place that nurses are, but there is a broad impact that can be had in this space for nursing. So two stories of some other nurses that I've worked with, I've had the pleasure of working with. One is a nurse engineer. And so she's been a biomedical engineer for 15 years. She worked on $1 million projects that took years. She said, and we'd bring these products back to the nurses. They were nursing products. And she said, nobody was happy. And it bothered her. She therefore ended up going to get her degree in nursing and is helping forge this path forward because she saw all these gaps. And now the impact that nurses can have in this space to really help guide product development and help guide the testing of these products to make sure that they're safe and effective it's a very valuable thing. So she can attest to the importance in the space. But then I also talked to another nurse who was an ER nurse, and she decided to jump into a company that had a product that she saw a lot of value to for her patients. And she said, I did the math, she said. And when I did the math, she said it would take about 200 years for me to work full-time as a nurse to impact the same number of lives that this product could impact in a year. And so right now, this space is somewhat siloed. And nurses don't think of themselves in this space, but we use more products than anybody in the healthcare space. And we understand the environment in a completely different way than any other healthcare provider. And we spend the most time with patients, especially in acute care. And so instead of having products that are handed to us and we figure out how to make the workflow work around them, nurses could be a part of pushing this path forward to create devices that work for our workflow and that can have an enormous patient impact. And so I'm really excited about where we're going. There's more and more nurses that are getting into the space, and we need more. It's been fun. So it's a team sport when you're developing a product, absolutely. But as a nurse, for instance, with the product that we designed and developed for tube line cord management and safety and securement, I was able to work directly with engineers and help guide the requirements for the device first. So say, oh, okay, this is what it needs to do as far as I understand that we'd go back and forth. We'd go to other nurses, continue to refine this list. Then in designing the product, we were able to rapidly go through, and he would create my engineering partner in crime, Kyle Jansen here. We would go back and forth. So he'd have a product, put it in my hands. I would get feedback from nursing and we'd modify it. And it was this quick development process that often doesn't happen. So not only can you guide the design, what does this really need to do to work for the workflow and work for what nurses do every day and what healthcare providers do every day? But then how do you test this? So my friend, the nurse engineer, also mentioned that she spent, as a biomedical engineer before she became a nurse, she spent hours in the lab doing bench testing on products to try to set up, make sure that they would work clinically effectively. And she said, if I look back now and I could talk to myself back then, she said, I would laugh, because I would set up testing and bench tests that weren't really accurate to what was happening clinically. Something that as a nurse now, she said, I can attest to. There are a growing number of nurses in this space. There's nurse entrepreneurs, and there's also nurses who work in their organizations and outside of their organizations to partner with people to move products forward in other ways. And so that is exciting. There are more of us, and we're connecting more and more. So connect with others who are in this space is one thing. The other thing, and I'm happy to talk to anybody as well, if you have an idea, there are ways to protect your idea. As nurses, we're often very giving, and we want to help, and we'll share our ideas, but your ideas have value. If there's an idea for a product or service that you have, there are ways to protect it. So not talking too much about it, start going and asking questions about the problem that you would be trying to solve, instead of talking about the device or service, to protect your idea. And you're not alone. This is a team sport. You're not alone. So there are many who will be able to help you through this process as you're going, myself included. First person that came to mind is her name, Dr. Karen Giuliano. She is a nurse. She's a nurse PhD and MBA. And so she has helped create some things like the oral care kits that we use all the time with our ventilated patients, and other really important products, and built research around them to show the impact. And so she's been able to have an enormous impact through her work in the product space. And she has provided so much insight to me and been so supportive along this journey, because we're kind of breaking into a new space. And so she's amazing. There's one other, a business mentor at the very beginning of this entire journey, when I decided I was going to go the entrepreneurship route with our device. He's the first one who really believed in me and helped me learn some of these business skills and be able to really show what value could be brought to patients from a financial perspective. And so, and then other nurse entrepreneurs. Like I said, there's a growing number of us. And I think I'm inspired by other nurses who have been doing this, who have been in this space, creating products, creating services to help bridge the gaps for patients. And so I'd say those are my three, if I had to pick three people and groups of people as the nurse entrepreneurs.